On behalf of the football club, welcome to the Just Say No evening. Now, Just Say No evening is probably a unique evening in the history of this football club. It's never been done before. So what we'll start tonight with, the first presenter will be Rick Nugent.
Thanks very much, Nashi. Firstly, congratulations to the club for putting a night like tonight on. Regularly in my world, we are discussing, strategising about how we can educate people and make them more aware of the dangers of alcohol, risk-taking behaviour, and in particular drugs. So, you know, for me, if there's one thing that you get out of today for the kids, one thing, and that is just a trigger that at some point in the future you'll stop and you'll think, geez, I remember about that, and I'll actually make a different decision. There's a story here a couple of years ago, not far from here. Luke and Paul. Luke and Paul, two mates, were picked up late at night when their parents didn't know they were picked up by four others in a car to go joyriding. Their mates, a couple 18, others 17, picked them up and started driving like hoons, being idiots. Luke and Paul tried to get them to stop and let them out. They wouldn't. Call them mummy's boy, you're weak, what are you going to do, who's going to pick you up at this time of night? And they just kept driving like idiots. Luke and Paul waited, and then the car stopped at a 7-Eleven to get some drinks. And Luke and Paul then refused to get back in the car. They're not getting in. They'll call all the names, the peer pressure. They copped a lot of grief. They were tempted. How are you going to get home? We'll drop you home. We'll take you straight back home, so don't worry about it. Trusted their gut instinct. Stayed. Ring mum. 4 minutes later, the car is wrapped around a pole and the other four kids are dead. All four of them. But they're mates as well. Then there's the grief they cop as well, losing their friends. But they weighed it up, they considered it, and they were brave, they were courage to say, no, not getting you back in the car, we know. Young people, cars, they're just a recipe for disaster when you're not experienced at doing that. This is a photo of a drug lab. Makes ice generally, used to make amphetamines, but now there's more money in ice, so the amphetamines not so much, they're ice. Drug dealers are all about making money. Manufacturers only care about making money. Believe it or not, they're not concerned with the health and well-being of the consumer. No? They don't care. They're manufacturing with these chemistry sets, and they failed chemistry in grade 5. In fact, most of them didn't get past grade 6, but there's money in it, and that's what they do. And we come across a lab almost daily. They'll be in cars, they'll be in motel rooms, they'll be in sheds, they'll be in bungalows, they'll be in rented homes. They cook it up. But it's difficult for them to get all the ingredients they need. So what they do is they substitute ingredients. So a regular substitute, paint thinners, Drano, rat sack, battery acid. When we raid these places, we get the lists and they try and work it out as to what percentage they have of rat sack that they can put in that's safe. But most of them can't add up. So they're taking a chance. So in terms of this sort of stuff, it's Russian roulette, this drug, because it is regularly made up of a whole lot of chemicals that are just not safe. But ice, more so than any other drug, and Jess will probably talk about this, is extremely addictive. The purity is getting stronger and stronger. Regularly we're told to use ice twice and the addiction is so great. It's so hard to give up. Generally starts with a weekend, generally starts with an occasional use, and then it continues from there. And when you talk to blokes that use it, they say they feel like Superman when they're on it. They feel so strong. They can party all night, they go days without sleeping. It's such a strong drug that makes them feel like Superman. But the problem is that once the drug's got hold of you, it then costs more and more to feed that addiction. And then more and more, they use up their pay, Then it goes from the pay to stealing, generally starts from mum and dad. Then it starts going from there into other forms of thieving. Often a drug dealer will encourage you to sell some to support your habit, because the bigger the network, the more they sell, and on it goes. But one of the real issues with this drug is psychosis. Drug-induced psychosis, and I don't know, Mariana, how much you study, but it is phenomenal. It's a bit like cannabis. Cannabis has this psychosis part that I think 1 in every 10 will suffer psychosis. And there's a really tragic case I have that I was involved in that is probably too disturbing to discuss here, involving a son and his parents. But the psychosis is real. The other part that happens around this drug as well is that people will end up being owed money. The drug dealers will be owed money that people will owe. And then they'll try and fund that debt. But quite often now, we actually get what we call home invasions. And that is the drug dealers will start targeting the home of the parents to get the money back that's owed. Balaclavas, firearms, 3 in the morning. It happens in Toorak, it happens in Brighton, and all of a sudden they just want their money. And it is horrific when it happens, and you get whole families having to relocate because of the activities of the criminals that are involved. Mitchell, that is his real name. Mitchell, 21, was an occasional user of cannabis, promising footballer, good motorbike rider, and on a particular day was encouraged to have a smoke, a pipe of ice. But Mitchell copped a bad batch. And very quickly, Mitchell's brain was destroyed by the ice. And that's the picture of Mitchell on your right there. He didn't live long. The parents had to turn the machine off because it just fried him. A bad batch. Geez, the dealers that time better put a bit too much battery acid in, put a bit too much paint thinners in. It's all over. So for the dealer, he starts up another lab, starts cooking again. But poor old Mitchell is gone. His family are devastated. At 3 o'clock in the morning one morning, sitting in the police car as a uniformed sergeant with my rookie offsider to do a death notification for a young guy who was 18 that died. And we sat there in the car for a while. And the young copper said to me, "What are we waiting for?" I said, "Well, we have no other jobs. I don't think there's any hurry to go and tell this family that their young son has died." I said, because once we tell them that, their lives are never ever going to be the same again. And believe me, when you knock on the door, and you knock a second time to wake them up, the moment they open the door, they know. And it's just, you know, if there's one thing out of all of this, never have that happen.
I've just got one quick case study, and it's somebody that most of you will know. David Hill from the Essendon Football Club. Before he started Essendon, was, if you flick through, I think he'll come up. He was at Peninsula Grammar. He was in year 11. They lived down in Frankston. 8 friends, him included, decided to take the car keys to one of the parents' cars. The parents didn't know. They got in the car. I don't know if alcohol was involved. They got about 300 metres up the road. They were going up a hill. They lost control of the car, cut it in half, and 3 of those people are dead. Now, he hasn't spoken about it, well, he spoke about it I think about 4 years ago. It was the first time that he actually canvassed the issue in public. He has ongoing issues in flashbacks. He says that he can't get the smell that he smelt that night, which was burning oil or whatever it was. It was one of these metallic burnings. But he constantly has flashbacks to that smell. Reminds him of what happened. He hasn't hardly made any contact with the families of the 3 friends, and they were great mates apparently, but he hasn't been able to speak to the families of the 3 people who died. And the guy that was driving the car went into juvenile detention for 2 years. The biggest thing that he said in that article that was in The Age, if you look up, you Google David Hill and car accident, and there's about 4 articles, and if you read those articles, in one of them he says, "I knew it was wrong, what we were doing. And then it also said, I think we all knew it was wrong, but they still did it. Now they had an out. They could have said, hang on, this is a bad idea. And he said they could have walked to where they were going. But they chose not to. If your friends start talking about it and saying, oh, you know, such and such offered me this or said we should do this, steer well away from it. Suggest to your friends that they steer well away from it. And I would even suggest that you need to speak directly to them, and you need to follow it up by speaking to their parents, because this is something that is so important. And if you can make one person avoid going through all of this stuff, then that's been worthwhile. Okay? I'll end it there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Travis. Mariana, up you come. Mariana's want to use the microphone, so obviously she's got a very loud voice, so pay attention.
Hello everyone, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I just want to say we haven't prepared these talks together, we just met. And it's scary how we all will sound the same and we talk about the same things. So, I'm going to declare a few things for you all. Firstly, I want to declare I'm very overwhelmed with the numbers here, and I thank you for inviting me. This is an absolute fantastic chance to talk about this, and thank you for coming. I have to declare that I am emergency and trauma specialist. I work in trauma centre, Australian biggest trauma centre. And yes, I do see the worst. I see the worst outcomes. There is much more out there. I see patients fighting for life. I see patients who are victims of major traumas. And they were affected by drugs or alcohol, or the person who caused the accident was affected by drugs and alcohol. Just last week, I treated severely injured teenage driver. One of police officers was sitting next to him. He was under arrest. His passenger died at the scene. My patient had broken neck bones. He wasn't asking for painkillers. He was overwhelmed by the fact that he's likely to be charged for murder. He wasn't worried that he may not walk again. The biggest risk to lose control is that you believe that you're in control of drugs. I'm telling you, no one is in control of drugs. The drugs are in control. The biggest risk is to say, it's not going to happen to me if I have a few drinks and sit behind the wheel. Your judgment is impaired. You have no control. If you survived that event, you just got lucky. You were not in control.
The next speaker is a person who I first met. I read an article in the paper some months ago, and it was in one of the Sunday papers, and it was about a young girl called Jess, and I got the email that the person who wrote the article had her email address on it. So I emailed that person and said, well, we're having this night. I'd like to sort of get in contact with this person if she would be willing to talk and do all those sorts of things. And she gave me Jess's email address. I've been in contact with Jess ever since. I spoke to her again early this week about what we wanted to talk about. And I suppose, and I said to Ian before, I was probably being a bit protective of her, because I said to Jess, oh, if there's any question you don't want to ask or answer, we'll steer away from it. I said, we'll steer the conversation away so you're comfortable with what you want to talk about. And again, as I said before, she's a very, very brave person, because she's quite willing to talk about how it started, where it led her to, and now she's come out the other side. So she is living proof of someone who's been through what everyone here is talking about. So Jess, up you come.
Wow, there's a lot of people here. Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay, my name's Jess, and I'm turning 21 this year, and I'm 3 years clean of using ice. I just want to say that I have so much respect for the emergency services and the police force, because you don't know the amount of times that I found myself in need of their help, and I just have so much respect for you guys. Okay, so I guess the best place to start in my story is where everybody's story starts. I was born, and if I stopped there, my story would be really simple. But as we all do, we grow up and we walk our own paths in life. Believe it or not, mine started pretty good. I grew up on the Gold Coast, and I had a really pleasant, well-off upbringing. And to look back, I look back with fond memories, and I'm very grateful for how I grew up and the morals and values that my parents instilled in me at a very young age. I was the smartest kid in my class, and I never had problems making any friends. I had dreams of being a marine biologist and even applied to uni in year 5. I got a reply back saying that I was rejected, and at the time that was the biggest problem that I ever faced. My dreams were big, and the opportunities to reach those dreams of mine were much bigger. I had the whole world in front of me, and I had every resource and tool that I needed to achieve those goals that I had. So fast forward a few years to my first year of high school, and my parents' marriage started to fall apart, and with that, my perfect world started to fall apart along with it. And eventually my mum and I, we moved to Melbourne, from nice warm sunny Queensland to this cold windy Melbourne that I'm still trying to get used to. I was 13 at the time, and being a 13-year-old girl is hard enough, let alone factoring in an interstate move, and it just threw my world upside down. I began year 8 in Melbourne at one of the most prestigious girls' schools in the state, and for a while I was doing really well. I made friends as I usually did, and I was studying hard like I always have. But I just couldn't help but feel that there was something in my life that was missing, and that was that family dynamic that was taken away from me when we moved. So now I was in a new city with no friends. I had nothing except my mum, and I was leaning on my mum for every social need that I had. So I started seeking this comfort and acceptance in all of the wrong places. So my friendship group at school started to break away, and I started turning into this big rebel, and I started to become leader of this misfit group that I created at school. And I started shaking things up really quickly, and I started rebelling against everyone and everything around me. I have clear memories of just skipping school for no apparent reason and stealing cigarettes from the local milk bar just to smoke in the park and feel like I was cool. Throughout this speech, I'm going to pinpoint moments in my life where I wish that I just said no, and that was the very first time that I look back and I wish I didn't do that. Because smoking cigarettes in the park is not cool. You're not being cool by missing out on school or missing out on an education. So this was one of those points that I needed to stop and I needed to get back on track, but instead I turned the other way. So this downward spiral that I was on, it only got steeper, and to the point where I was slipping so much that I needed an intervention. So eventually, Mum picked up on the fact that I needed to break away from that cycle. So we moved. We moved from the eastern suburbs all the way to the western suburbs, and soon enough, quicker than I could blink, I'd made friends again with the wrong crowd, and found myself in the park smoking weed from 9 AM till 3 PM. I was stoned all the time, and I had no hesitations to experiment with other drugs at this time either. After all, I had no self-care and worth, so what was there to lose? Weed turned into LSD, and LSD turned into pills, and pills turned into mushrooms, and the list just went on and on. My timeline of my life starts to blur at this point, and I only have what I can call snapshots of memories now. And that just goes to show like what damage drugs can actually do to you, because I don't have recollection of years of my life. I don't know what I was doing and where I was. I remember being passed out in a bathroom after eating too many magic mushrooms, and I remember wanting to kill myself because my trips got too intense. And most of all, I remember those times I was so scared and vulnerable. I put myself into these dangerous situations, and I thank God that I made it out alive. So that's moment 2 where I wish majority of the time I just said no. So that's just my high school years, and they seemed pretty hectic already, right? There was a period of time between, I think it was about year 8 and 9, where I wanted to settle down and I wanted to get my life back together. I was determined to find that smart and intelligent girl that I left in Queensland. But I had no idea how to, but I also had no idea what was lying ahead of me. So again, I enrolled in a brand new different school in a different town, and I tried to do this thing again for a fresh start. I got a part-time job at a fast food restaurant, and I was studying. I remember the day that I walked into this new school, and I thought to myself, is there a sign on my forehead that says I'm trouble? Because it seems like the trouble crowd always seem to gravitate towards me. So yeah, before you know it, I met this guy, and on the first day of my brand new school, for the 3rd time, I found myself in his garage smoking weed with him and his dad. And it was a really, really weird moment, and again, that's one of those moments I was like, why didn't I just say no? Why do I keep doing this to myself? But yeah, shaking my head, sitting there thinking, yeah, I should have said no, but I didn't, and I didn't know why I couldn't seem to manage to take better care of myself. So that's the point where I developed this stuff-it attitude, and I told myself, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. So to cut a long story short, I ended up dropping out of school completely 3 weeks after I started at that new school, because I just couldn't balance normal life with drug use anymore. I told myself I was going to work full-time, but that didn't work out either. One night at work, a guy I'd seen around town walked in to work, and he gave me his phone number. And I didn't really know him. He was a friend of a friend. But I was still only 17, so my first thought was, oh, he can buy me cigarettes and he can buy me alcohol. So as soon as I finished work that night, I rang him, and he said, come to this address. That's literally all he said. And you'd think that I would be like, that's not safe, let's not do that, Jess. But no, I didn't really care, and I found myself in a room full of junkies, people that were shooting up heroin and ice next to me. And I was scared, and I was questioning whether or not I should have left, or do I just stay and pursue this curiosity that I had? I didn't know what to do. The time to make that decision was taken from me, and before you know it, I was being offered a crack pipe to my left. In my mind, I was like, don't do this, Jess, don't do it. And my mind kept telling me, don't do it, but there was this other part of me that's like, sure, what's there to lose? You've lost everything. So I took a toke, my eyes widened, and my heartbeat got so fast, faster than it is right now talking to you, which is unbelievable. So I was on the ground, and it wasn't like I passed out, but it was just my body was overwhelmed with stimulation that I just collapsed. And first thing that I said when I came to was that I wanted more of it. So the spiral of my meth addiction began. I quit my job and I left home. I moved into a squatter's house where we had no running water, no electricity, there were mice and cockroaches everywhere. But I was happy because I had the love of my life with me, which was meth. My mum at this point had made missing person reports and had called the police countless times to try and save me, but I was beyond help at this stage. I was 17 and I was legally allowed to be independent, according to the law and according to Centrelink, who so kindly funded my addiction. But when Centrelink didn't feel like being nice to me anymore, I sourced money from burglaries, theft, pawning my belongings, and even staging a robbery at my own mother's house so I could steal her jewellery. The extent that I went to get my fix was incredible, and as always, my motivation never failed me. I could go on to recall various incidences I had been in violent altercations with people. I could tell you about the time that I stabbed someone and nearly killed them, or the time that I wanted to jump in front of a train because I was so depressed and I didn't know how to get out of this vicious circle I was in. But I don't think that's necessary tonight. There's times and places for everything, and there's a time and a place when your gut instinct is telling you no. And let me tell you right now, because you should listen to me, I'm not wearing a uniform, and like I said, I'm so respectful of these guys here, but I'm on the other side of things. And if you listen to anyone tonight, please make it me. So eventually I found myself in hospital, and the nurses and doctors were telling me that if I didn't stop what I was doing, I was going to die. My organs had failed on me, and my body was shutting down due to a lack of food and sleep over a period of weeks. And I knew that I needed to stop, and it was time to stop, and I needed help. So 35 kilos I weighed. I had decaying teeth, and my skin was grey. I walked to the front door of my mum's house and I said, "I'm done now, Mum, I need help." And the funny thing is, the memories that I have of rehab are actually more scary than the memories I have of using ice, because the withdrawal symptoms of meth are insane. They're horrifying and they're painful, and it's something I literally would not wish on my best friend or my worst enemy. I knew it was that, going through that, or I was going to die, so it was my only choice. 18 months later, I had completed my rehab program and I was on the road I am now of recovery. Unfortunately, addicts will always be addicts, and I'll be dealing with these demons every day of my life. But through healthy alternatives, I find myself striving to reach those dreams that I once had when I was young. Thanks.
Yeah, well done. Carmel, you're next.
Jess, after that, I wish I wasn't next. That was just outstanding, and you are one courageous woman. As Steve introduced, one of the roles that I have is to sit on the Adult Parole Board. I'm one of 22 community members, and I sit probably 30 days a year. And that role involves me sitting with offenders when they're coming to the end of their what's called head sentence, and trying to convince the board that they're now ready for release onto parole. I'm now going to introduce you to Oscar. Oscar was a culpable drive. Now, Oscar is definitely not one of your typical offenders in prison. He came from an extremely wealthy family, and for his 18th birthday, his dad gave him a new car. This is what Oscar had said. "Prison for me was somewhere criminals went. 5 years ago, if I'd been asked, do you think you'd be in a maximum security prison doing gym training with an ex-juice head, I'd say I'd probably have more chance of dying in a freak accident than actually coming to prison." As I said, Oscar came from upper middle class society. And earlier that night, he was 18 by the way, which is why he got the car. Earlier that night, he and his mates decided they'd go to a party. Oscar knew he was going to drink, but he wanted to drive there. He wanted to show off his new car. But he started drinking a little bit more. He didn't get absolutely intoxicated, but he was drunk. So one of his mates said, "You're not driving home tonight, give me your keys and get in my car." So he did. But on the way home, he said to his mate, "Listen, Dad's going to go nuts if he knows that I've left my car in the street. Can I just go and check that it's still there?" What his mate didn't know, that when he took Oscar to the car, Oscar got out of the car, he got into his car, and he drove it up the street. He was about a minute from home when he took the corner really badly and he hit a pedestrian. He was arrested at the scene. What Oscar did do was he ran triple O because he knew that this guy was in serious trouble. But he was arrested at the scene, and he was tested, and he blew over the limit. The next case study is Zach. He was also culpable driving. He had no drugs in his body, and he had no alcohol in his system. He just had the phone. What?
Rick and I have sort of spoken about for a long, long time. And I mean, as I said, he deals with it every day of his life. And when we started this and when we spoke to everyone at the start of the evening, we all just said we could change one person in this room, whether it be a 14-year-old or a 19-year-old, to make the right choice and to save their life. It's been a success. But I mean, we can talk about, and these people can talk about all these different scenarios, and Carmel can talk about the case studies and whatever. But if you don't think it can happen to you, you're in the wrong space. You have got no idea what it's like. Because in the private conversations I've had with Rick and with Carmel, it's out there. It's in our backyard. And as I said at the start of the evening, Rick was very proud of the fact he found one football club that doesn't have an ice problem. Well, we have a real problem in society, and if we can draw a line in the sand tonight with all your children here, we draw a line in the sand. So that's not for us. We're going to say no. It's been a success. At the start of the evening, we did say it was going to be confronting. I think it has been, but these people here, we've got to sort of thank for giving up their time.
Thank you to you five for sharing your experiences and your stories. And Jess, I think you're one of the most bravest and very articulate young women I've met and heard speak, and I'd like to thank you especially for being so brave. And if your life story can change one life, then everything that you've been through has been worth it. So I'd like to just put your hands together for all of our speakers. And thank the John Morris Football Club community for doing what you do the best, and that is being a community. We pride ourselves on being a community club, and I think tonight we have again showed why we excel in that area. So thank you very much.